I'll provide you your bio and then hand it off to you.
Perfect.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Jean-Pierre, here for the Digital Transformation and Government Conference, Day 3 in Stream 2. I'm here to present you Dr. Daniel Amiat, who is Professor of the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at the University of Ottawa, Co-Director of the Graduate Programs in Digital Transformation and Innovation. He's currently doing innovation in software engineering, scenario-based and based requirements engineering. This is process modeling and mining, inventory compliance, smart contracts, and healthcare informatics. He led the standardization for the user requirements notation, combining goal and process modeling at the International Telecommunication Union. He's now heavily invested in the development of Symbolio language for specifying, verifying, and monitoring smart legal contracts. He was the general chair for the Requirements Engineering Conference in 2015 and program co-chair in 2018. He's on the editorial boards of a couple of journals as a professional engineer, member of KIPS, and senior member of IEEE. And today he's going to be talking to us about a multidisciplinary approach to digital transformation and innovation for DTI. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Jean. It's my real pleasure to be here. I attended a few sessions already, and they're quite amazing. So I'm glad that I was able to be given a chance to contribute myself. So DTI is an acronym that you will see quite often. So I will make sure that you understand what it means. So it's really the digital transformation and innovation. So my presentation will be given in 2 parts. So the first one will be about the DTI programs at the University of Ottawa. And the second one will mainly target sample research projects that are multidisciplinary in nature, in which I have been involved over the past few years and in which I am also still involved. Just to give you a flavor of the kind of work that is being done right now in that space. And that's just a small sample that concerns me at this point. So digital transformation and innovation itself is increasingly essential everywhere, and this is certainly one of the takeaways I want you to have after this presentation. So I'm giving you all the conclusions up front, so that if you have something else to do later, then if you miss the end, you will see essentially what's important to retain. Obviously, the DTI programs at the University of Ottawa are great. They are multidisciplinary in nature, and they produce also well-rounded graduates ready to contribute to a better world. And there are also many opportunities to collaborate with DTI students and with professors, and I'll show essentially how this can be done. And hopefully my sample of 4 projects will give you an idea that DTI research can take many forms, but often combines technology with management and or communications in various domains of application. So for the first part, the DTI programs at the University of Ottawa. So I have stolen a few screenshots from the DTIUottawa.ca website, which is actually managed by our own students. And they had very interesting snippets of text trying to describe essentially the intent of the program. So leveraging interdisciplinary knowledge for societal benefit, informing evidence-based digital policy. So obviously, we do a lot of data analysis, many of which goes essentially into policymaking with governments, harnessing creativity to foster digital innovations, So we do a lot of innovation as well, hence the I in the program. And we also have new flavors of the programs that target, for example, user experience design. And finally, leverage the power of technology to transform business and society in general. So talking about leveraging, essentially what we try to do with the students who graduate from our programs, essentially to optimize business processes and meet the requirements of various kinds of stakeholders in a competitive market, to analyze large amounts of data, to discover actionable insight, make informed business decisions, improve operational efficiency. So all of the things you would expect from a management plus technology combination, but also communicate strategic and operational insights to leadership effectively so that they can do proper decision-making, design creative user experiences in business and social interactions, improve customer engagement, support continuous innovation, and many other cool things. So the programs themselves try essentially to train highly qualified and well-rounded professionals so that they can create, manage, and research a profound change to our world that is happening as a result of digital technology. And this is truly multidisciplinary in the sense that the program itself is hosted in 3 different faculties at the university, so engineering, management, and arts, with additional professors when, for example, we have theses that require additional inputs from experts from education, law, health science, social science, etc. DTI is a follow-up to our previous programs in e-business. So we have revamped them and rebranded them a few years ago. And now they are part of the new School of Engineering, Design and Teaching Innovation, SEDT, who is essentially launching right now in parallel with this presentation. So SEDT is a new structure inside the Faculty of Engineering, where we are essentially hosting the various multidisciplinary programs that exist in engineering, so DTI, but also system science and engineering management, for example. Now, the programs themselves come in multiple flavors. So we target people who have a research orientation, but also people who are looking for a professional program without a thesis. So we've had a PhD for the past 8 years. We have a master's degree with thesis and one with project since 2006, so 15 years already. And recently we added 2 concentrations. The first one in applied data science, because this is obviously something that is increasingly important these days, but also one in user experience design after consultation with multiple industrial partners here in Ottawa. We have also more micro programs that are being added in the near futures. So the program itself right now has about 60 PhD students in various domains and 100 master students. Many of them are, or actually most of them are international students, and pretty much all of them have work experience as well. So we can also benefit from the expertise that these students bring to the table. The programs cover a wide variety of courses as well. So we do have some that are a bit more research oriented. So research workshops, research methods where we teach quantitative and qualitative research approaches, as well as systematic reviews, design thinking, design science, and so on. All of our students also have to take a course in ethics. So we have a few different flavors from communication, from engineering as well. And obviously they have access to a wide variety of data science, data analytics, BI courses, more conventional courses on internet technologies, mobile commerce, e-commerce. More recently, we've added new courses on systems of innovation and also inclusive innovation, which is very contemporary as a topic as well. And given the new concentration in user experience, we have a variety of courses that try to connect engineering with management and arts all together, including specific courses that integrate arts into science, technology, engineering, arts, and math design. Given the importance of security and architecture, we also have a variety of courses around these disciplines: project management, digital marketing, entrepreneurship, and many more. So we have enough to keep our students busy, and usually they really like the offering that we have. In terms of experiential learning, which is one of the areas in which the University of Ottawa is trying to provide a lot of support, we have a very successful co-op program for our master's students. So usually we have 8-month internships in industry, and very often actually the students end up working for these companies afterwards, or these departments if they go with the government. This is really appreciated by our international students who come here with already good degrees and good work experience, but they don't have a North American degree or a North American experience. So this gives them a good access to a network, and also some important items to add to their resume so that they can easily find something once they graduate. Our master's students can either do a thesis or a research project or an industry internship project as well. So we do place students inside industry outside of co-op. For those who are doing a thesis, often they will try to have some sort of an internship as well, sponsored by MyTax and other such organizations. We have work study programs, and also FSWEP, which is a Canadian federal program to host students as interns inside the government. Obviously, we have research and teaching assistantships, but we also have a very interesting professional development club, which creates its own, I would say, training and opportunities for people to find interesting ways to improve themselves and find good positions once they graduate. So we're open to real external projects with real people for many of these opportunities. I had a quick look recently at the recent thesis that we have produced, and I listed some of them. So these are all from the past year. And this is just to give you an idea of the variety of areas in which our students are working on a research perspective. So digital technologies obviously are everywhere. We have some that, for example, will look at healthcare and as a application domain, given the availability of many interesting and research-oriented hospitals that we have in Ottawa. Some of them will look at social media, e-commerce, and so on. So this is, in a nutshell, what we have as a program for digital transformation and innovation at the University of Ottawa. Obviously, I'll be open for your questions in this area, should you have any, either during the presentation or afterwards. Now, I'm going to switch mode to a more, I would say, application-oriented discussion on 4 sample digital transformation research projects that essentially involve DTI students, but also that combine engineering and computer science with management, law, healthcare, and public affairs. So to give you an idea of the importance of multidisciplinarity again, when we deal with digital transformation. The first one is very dear to my heart. So for the past 20 years, I've been involved in the what we call the requirements engineering community. This is where I do most of my research. And along the way, we have created modeling languages for business processes and for goal-oriented modeling that we have combined and standardized as part of an ITUT, so International Telecommunication Union standard called the User Requirements Notation. And the idea is really to try to help people assess and ensure that an organization's processes are aligned with its goals in a continuous digital transformation context. And for this, we really need to have the two views being documented properly. And essentially, we have published recently a paper that goes back over the past 2 decades where we have done this work using this kind of notation. So just in a nutshell, the user requirements notation is trying to help people model who are the stakeholders of a system, what do they want in terms of goals, what can they do in terms of tasks and activities, what kind of metrics exist to essentially measure how well goals are being achieved along the way. And also the various links that exist between those elements, whether they are decomposition links or contribution links, which can be positive or negative. So this is typical of the kind of information we manipulate in management for decision making, but with a concrete graphical syntax. And we also have a more conventional business process notation. The one that is part of the standard is called use case maps. It's something that essentially provides sequencing between activities, including alternatives, decomposition, concurrency, and so on. So it's very much similar to BPMN, the business process model and notation, to some extent to activity diagrams and UML, if you know of these languages. What's interesting within the URN is that we can create traceability links between these two views, which enable people to reason about alignment between goals and processes. And this is supported by a variety of tools, including one that we produce here at the University of Ottawa called GCMNav. Just to give you an example, suppose that we have a very simplistic goal model with a couple of actors who want to achieve some objectives of being at work. Either I can go to work by bus or by bike, and they will have positive or negative impact on improving my health as a worker. And then I can have a more sequential process-oriented view along the way of what's happening. So, you know, in the morning, I get awakened, I leave, I take some transportation, and I am at work at the end. And there are a couple of ways in which I can do the transport activity. I can take my car, I can take the bus as well. And then I can try to connect those things together using the URN links I was talking about earlier. So the worker and the process view is the same as the stakeholder and the goal view. And I can have, you know, an attempt to connect by bus with some sub-process in my model. Obviously, I can make mistakes along the way, or I can be in a position where I'm missing something. So there are probably missing links in this model here. So the transportation system is probably the same as the system in the process view. Maybe there are links that do not really make sense. So connecting by bus to take car is probably a mistake. Actually, take car doesn't have any corresponding activity in the goal model. So maybe there's some options missing at that level and so on. So I can make sure that I align my views together and ensure that syntactically, at least, some of my elements are not missing or not superfluous. Obviously, we have this kind of thing supported in our tools, so we can provide means to automate the analysis of these links and report on things that are suspicious or blatant errors along the way. Now, above this simple feature that we have, obviously we can use that for more interesting purposes. And one of them has been regulatory compliance, something in which we've been working for the past 15 years, especially with Sepeli Ganavetti, who is now teaching at the University of Maine. Essentially, the idea is that organizations usually have a lot of procedures and policies describing what the organization members should be doing. And we can obviously capture that using a goal model with various goals and tasks. And sometimes we also have business processes described. And that's my case in my own organization. So the University of Ottawa has thousands of pages of procedures. We have obviously a lot of goals and many processes that have been described explicitly. Now, if I go and look at the regulatory framework, we have laws and regulations that we need to comply with at the organizational level. Again, these can be abstracted in terms of goal models. So we have been developing ways to convert essentially laws and regulations to goal models, which enable some sort of traceability in between so that we can find mismatches already at that level. And sometimes we have regulations and laws that are a bit more operationalized, so we can extract business processes from them and look at traceability between the two aspects so that we can reason about compliance in addition to alignment along the way. We have also used this kind of approach in healthcare, for example, where very often we need to make decisions about new technologies to embed inside the organization. And again, we are describing what are the goals, what are the processes of the target organization, or say a hospital, for example, but also what are the processes that are needed to exploit a new technology? What are the goals of the new technology? See how to integrate them, right? Because integrating new technology in a large organization is often disruptive. So how do we change the current processes to integrate what is required by the processes from the new technology? How do we align the goals properly? So there are many decisions that need to be made at this level. And essentially what Malak, who is now teaching back home in Saudi Arabia, she developed an approach, again, supported by tools that supports the user requirements notation to integrate all of these views and make more informed decisions at an architectural level and also in terms of change management so that we have fewer surprises once we have deployed our new technology in the organization. So goal process alignment, a lot of it is modeling. So you'll see that I love modeling. So this is my research area. But we also realize that often it's difficult for people to come up with business process models of what's happening inside the organization. And also there is usually a mismatch between what they think the processes are or what they wish the processes are and what's really happening in reality. And just to give you an example, this is a prescribed business process, I would say, inviting people to walk on the sidewalk and take a special path to get to the door of the building. But if you look at what people are actually doing, right? So this was taken in the winter, so we have a few traces, and those traces suggest that people are not always following the process model as they should, right? So they're taking shortcuts. Now you can put this back into an information technology context where you have many types of information systems that produce event logs, so who is doing what when, and you can essentially infer a business process of what's happening in reality. And suddenly you will see that there is perhaps a mix of people following the process model and a set of people who are taking shortcuts. And then because there is a distinction between what's happening and what you wish was happening, you can start asking questions, right? So should I change my process model to reflect what is happening in reality? Or should I provide perhaps incentives or constraints, or, penalties, so that people actually do not take shortcuts and actually follow the process itself? And the term process mining is really about discovering business processes from event logs. And there is a huge community of people doing that. Lots of tools are available in that space. And the question here is really how can digital transformation enable better use of event logs to understand and improve processes and to also check compliance. So process mining is really taking as input event logs coming from one or multiple systems. Minimally, usually you will have some sort of a process instance identifier, so something that identifies a student or a user or a patient in a hospital context, what event is happening and when. So those are the minimal things that need to be provided in such event logs, but sometimes you have additional information about the resources or parameters of these events along the way. And sometimes that can be very complicated. For example, in cloud-based applications, it's not rare to find situations where one event will have a couple of hundreds of parameters attached to it. So lots of information. Once we have the raw logs from the systems, usually we need to clean the data because there is a lot of noise, a lot of things we don't need, and it just makes the resulting process models more complicated than what they should be. So there is a lot of manual effort that needs to happen here. But once we have done that, we can import the data set to some process mining tool, and there are different algorithms that exist in that space to produce process models in different languages. So either just, as you see it here, ad hoc process map with just activities and links between them. But we can also produce Petri nets or BPMN models. That's something that most tools will enable. And the result is the process model reflecting the information that is in the event log. And essentially, once we go from the log to the process model, this is what we call process discovery. But process mining can be used beyond just discovery and trying to understand what's going on in reality. Actually, we can find, hotspots along the way, which will enable some sort of enhancement that we can essentially implement and then check again to see if our changes have improved the situation compared to before the change. And also we can use this information for conformance, a bit like what I was talking in the previous slide. So essentially, how do we compare what's happening in reality with what we think should happen, or perhaps what must happen given perhaps some regulatory constraints. Since a lot of the manual effort is invested in pre-processing the event logs, I have had a couple of students explore essentially ways to automate this a little bit better and to be perhaps a bit more clever about what to filter out, what to reduce, what to remove, so that we can extract useful information from the logs before we visualize it as a process model. And this is the topic of this method here from Najal Garib, where we want to find an efficient API, so an application programming interface, to support scripting and programs that will filter events, their attributes, and traces inside the event logs before feeding those logs to our process mining tools. And essentially, our API has been implemented in R, and we're working towards a Python implementation as well these days. It's really meant to manipulate rows, columns, and traces inside an event log by adding information, removing information, or modifying information. And some of the elements are quite complicated, like merging rows. What do we do with the parameters? Well, we can take the maximum, the minimum, the average. So all of these is taken care of at the API level. And the result is that instead of visualizing what we call spaghetti models, like this one here, which is totally useless to understand what's going on inside the process, we eliminate all of the noise, focus on what's really important, and can in the end visualize information in a format that human beings can actually understand and act upon. So there's a huge reduction in complexity. We're trying to preserve the main information to support decision-making along the way. More importantly, this is scriptable and reproducible as the data set is changing all the time. And we want this to be fast and scalable so that we can use it in our daily activities. So Najat did that for her master's thesis, and she's continuing with a PhD in DTI. Another student looked at a different angle to simplify the process models, essentially tried to extract information from the logs that would satisfy some goals in a goal model, so that we could represent only the process for which the various traces of events satisfy those goals. So we came up with this goal-oriented process enhancement and discovery approach, where the inputs are event logs, which can be pre-processed with the work we just saw from the previous slide. But another input is a goal model, essentially describing what are the objectives, how do we measure them, and the measure essentially are some of the columns that we have inside of the element. So this information can be handled together in such a way that we can ask specific queries at this level here to select proper information and output different types of process models. So Madi Gassemi has been working on this. So he recently defended his thesis on goal-oriented process mining. And he applied this to various kinds of event logs and traces, including in a healthcare context. So we looked at hospital sepsis information from a hospital in the Netherlands. So we had access to an open source trace in that context. And sepsis is a very bad thing, especially in an emergency department inside hospitals, where bacteria can essentially lead to attack some of your organs along the way. So you need to detect it and treat it as soon as possible when that happens. And we discussed with physicians about what would be, a goal model that would make sense, what kind of indicators should be used to actually understand what's going on. And we use that as input to the method that Madi has developed so that we can start asking interesting queries. For example, show me the process model for the traces where the top level goal is satisfied at a level of 95% or more. And suddenly, boom, we have a process model for those traces. So this means that this process model here essentially is about best practices, more or less. So it's telling me what is it that people do in terms of sequencing of steps such that we have a high probability of meeting the goals that we have set up. But we can ask other types of queries. For example, show me the process model where we fail at meeting a particular goal. So essentially you see a process that represents the steps that people are taking in reality and essentially fail at the end, right? They don't meet the goal. So once you have those multiple views, you can start to put into place inside the organization some incentives to bring people towards the best practices, and perhaps some training or some penalties for people who take the bad steps, the bad sequencing of steps that are leading to bad outcomes in the end. So goal-oriented process mining. And what we're working on these days, especially with Naja as well, is to bring process mining to a new direction. So you probably have heard of robotic process automation, which essentially enable organizations to automate various kinds of practices, perhaps when those practices involve some office tools or some web-based applications along the way. So RPA allows people to automate across tools and across platforms. But there are many challenges that exist, and this is what we have looked at in a recent literature survey about the challenges that exist when trying to combine process mining with RPA. And there are many, many challenges that exist that are unique to process mining and unique to RPA, but some of them are common as well. And the idea is to come up with mechanisms, essentially, where people could better understand what are the processes inside the organizations that would benefit from RPA in the first place, and perhaps even try to simulate the impact of automating those things prior to deciding to using RPA to automate them. So this is work in progress. Lots of interesting action happening in that space these days. The third one is about regulatory intelligence. So we saw earlier that we used the user requirements notation for discussing or analyzing compliance between organization processes and regulations. We tried to go beyond that recently with O'Heidi, who's collaborating with Transport Canada these days. Essentially, we're trying to enable some sort of evidence-driven analysis and evolution of regulatory requirements. So regulatory intelligence in our definition is focusing a bit more on regulators rather than regulated parties. So there's a lot of work out there, lots of tools that help organizations comply with regulations from different regulators. But very few tools exist that actually can help regulators improve their regulations that are being complied with by various kinds of organizations. So essentially, regulators are always asking, well, the regulations that I have, the various programs and initiatives that I put in place to help my stakeholders better comply with those regulations, are they efficient? Are they effective? And those are real questions. And unfortunately, to answer them, very often we have very complex methods in place that can take 1 year or 2 years to be able to answer those questions properly. And what we would like to do is to enable some sort of digital transformation that would bring this information closer to regulators and closer to a real-time availability along the way. And this also can help regulators answer other types of important questions. For example, does my regulation matter? So is by the fact of complying with my regulation, do I observe the societal impact or outcome that I expected in the first place? And just to illustrate this a bit better from an intuitive perspective, in Ontario, we have fairly recent regulations for telling people essentially that drivers shall not text on mobile phones while driving. And you cannot just create a law like this and put it into place. You have to raise the awareness about the existence of that law, essentially train the people in understanding what they can do, what they cannot do. So very often some initiatives will involve huge advertisement programs along the way. And the societal goal that is attached to that regulation essentially is to minimize the number of testing related accidents. And you can have specific metrics along the way. And this is where, the text of the law will not provide measures or metrics or indicators or KPIs, but regulators have them behind their mind, right? So if we can put them on paper, for example, what is a good compliance measure? What is a good performance measure for my initiative? How do I actually assess whether my societal goal has been met or not? So once I have this information, I can again create some sort of goal models, right? So we saw earlier that we can use goal models to reflect what's happening inside the regulation, but also how we measure with indicators whether or not, by propagating those values through the structure of the goal model, whether or not those things, what I observed in the real world, leads me to believe that I have a good regulation. And I can do the same with my programs or my initiatives along the way, like raising awareness through advertisement. And I can do again this with another type of goal model. So 3 goal models, one for the initiatives, one for the regulation, one for the societal outcome along the way. And the real question is, if my initiative works well, does this lead to improved compliance at the regulation level? And the second question is really, if I have good compliance on my regulation, does this lead to my societal outcome? And those are very complicated questions, right? Because there is a huge variety of regulations and societal goals out there. And it's very difficult to understand what's going on. So what we've done essentially is find ways to populate those goal models so that we can provide values observed from sources of information and compute essentially how well the goals are satisfied, and put that in databases at different moments in time. So we have a collection of snapshots of how well the initiatives, regulations are doing and how well the outcomes are being satisfied or not. And once you have that database in place, you can use more conventional analytics and BI tools to visualize this information. And we've been playing with Watson Analytics, which has been absorbed in Cognos BI because it has a natural language interface that we can use to query essentially what's going on. And it will choose essentially an appropriate visualization to display the results. So I can check whether the values of a specific program and regulations essentially compare by province and across multiple years. And this will be generated automatically. Same thing, I can say, what are the values of some part of my initiative by province, and it will understand that the province essentially is a geographical area, so it will use a map as a means to describe what's going on. And same thing, we can have other visualizations for correlations between essentially what part of the initiatives drive compliance to regulations, and essentially try to understand what are the good things and the bad things about my initiative, so I can improve it so that I have better compliance and eventually better societal outcomes as a result. So this has been around for a while. We've had good feedback about this. More recently, I've been involved a bit more in smart contracts, maybe in 2 minutes. Essentially, there is a huge difference between legal contracts, which specify the terms and conditions that apply to business transactions, and smart contracts, which are programs that are meant to automate and control some aspect of the execution of these legal contracts. And smart contracts is a term that has been hijacked, I would say, to some extent. Initially, it's been around before blockchains. It doesn't need to be runnable on blockchains, but it could along the way. And the question here is, how can we use digital transformation to go from traditional legal contracts to smart ones? And this is what we have explored over the past 3 years, and we're still working on this part. So we developed a domain-specific language describing essentially legal contracts that we can use to enable formal analysis at design time to find gaps and holes and contradictions in contracts, but that we can also use as an input to a code generator that would produce smart contracts on a given platform. For example, we support Hyperledger Fabric and produce code in JavaScript right now for that platform. So essentially from contract templates, we use our language to formalize a bit more what's happening along the way. And we can use that to analyze what's going on and produce code that will monitor whether or not those contracts are being violated or satisfied by the various parties involved. So lots of publications in that space, but I need to conclude because time is flying. So my conclusions are the same as the takeaways I mentioned earlier. So DTI is increasingly essential everywhere. DTI programs are multidisciplinary and produce well-rounded graduates ready to contribute to a better world. There are many opportunities for experiential learning that involves industrial collaborators. So don't be shy, contact me if you have some ideas. And I hope that the various research projects that I have quickly illustrated show you that DTI research can take many forms, but often combines technology with management and communications in various kinds of areas and domains. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm ready to take questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Daniel Amiot. That was a really great presentation. Just, I guess, it delved into details that I certainly wasn't aware of before. So thank you very much for that. Great programs at Ottawa U, it seems, and yielding some great work. Right now, we don't have any questions in place, but just remind everybody to click on the Q&A button in the upper right. You can ask them some questions. I guess we talked a little bit about some of the programs or some of the outputs. I just want to pull up one of the things here. Some of the work had been done from private sector. Has there been very much work that's been done to date with your students to focus on government and the federal service.
Yes, so essentially the work that we've been doing in regulatory intelligence has been done for many years. Actually, I think one of the person attending is working for Transport Canada and worked on this many years ago, Dr. Edna Brown. And we've been working with, for example, Transport Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, some provincial regulators also in Alberta, where we have used those technologies, those modeling approaches to try and understand essentially what works and what doesn't work inside the organization. So that's certainly one example where we have had close relationships with the government in that space. And obviously, I've been working a lot with hospitals, and again, this is a public sector, but both in terms of I would say the research branches of hospitals, but also the operations branches of hospitals who want a specific tool or a specific way to improve their processes along the way, either administrative or clinical sometimes.
Well, I think that there's a lot more opportunities out there, I guess, for cross government. That would be great to follow some of these concepts. I've got a question here. Who at your center should be approached for more details on potential collaborations and the sort of timelines and standard contractual arrangements your center uses? Yeah.
I would say the easiest way is to contact me. So I am in touch both with, well, I'm one of the directors of the DTI program, right? So I'm also in touch very closely with the co-op office, should co-op be an option. Co-op has its own ways of doing, their own process for managing projects and collaborations, but I can certainly open a few doors. But whether this is, for example, internships, right? So industry internships, they can be with the public sector or the private sector. These are usually great because they're not paid, right? So they are doing this work for credit. So this can be done in a very short term, right? So a couple of weeks before the beginning of the semester, we can have a project that is being described, proposed, and suddenly the student will be available to collaborate with people. And obviously they would have their own learning objectives, and there would be a need for a professor to be involved to essentially grade what is being produced at the end, because this is still a course. But otherwise, this is very easy to do. The only issue is that this needs to be these two things need to be aligned with the semesters that we have on campus, right? So semester starts in early September, early January, early May. But if you arrive, in March, for example, you're in the middle, so you will need to wait perhaps a couple of months to have access to a student.
Well, I guess we'll wrap things up. Once again, thanks very much for your presentation, and thanks for sharing your ideas and all the great work that's being done. So thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully
Yes,
there's still some coffee there.
Yes, I hope so. Cheers.
Take care. Bye now.